Stranger than the spooky, adventurous and loony, they're all together ooky, the Bud family. Their trips are amazing when people come to see 'em. They really are amazing, the Bud family. History, ghost, art. So put on a witch's shawl on, a seat so you can relax on. We're gonna play a call on the Bud family. It's Wednesday. It's finally October. I've been trying to jump to October for like the last week. We got so many things going on. Tomorrow will be our very first live, well, not first live, first seasonal live, I guess is what the best description is. In the months of October, November, and December, we will go live every Tuesday and Thursday. What time? Sometime after I'm off work. This could be 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Central Time. I don't know. Depends on if we're working overtime or not. You'll just have to watch and see when we pop up. All right, but before all of that, we've got a race to run. I chose a doggy race because today's video, I almost said episode, I guess that's not wrong, is about Peanuts, the comic strip, and they have a famous doggo. Snoopy. These are not Snoopy doggies. These are greyhounds, but that's okay. They're dogs. Hopefully you'll enjoy talking about the Peanuts comics. It's always been one of my favorites. I love the comics for the Peanuts. But before that, we have a race to run. Okay. So, start. I forgot the start button here for a minute. Okay. We've got Bobby, there's Sandra, there's Zoel, Redhead, Strong Mind, Vaughn, Duo, 5 Can, there's Principal, there's Hippie, there's Travis, Railroad, Hillbillies, Prime, Tissue, Betty, Kara, I don't know, I'm not good with names, Black Beauty, Sea Tripping, Principal's currently in the lead. Let's see, who else do we see coming up from the back? We got Jody, let's see, Moon, Resin. Oh, it might be Resin. Is it going to be Resin? Nope, Resin got beat by Walter. Hang on a minute. Alright, so this is Walter's Sauces and More. As you can see, they make sauces. I haven't posted in a while. But they have shorts a lot of various things. And no recent lives. So I don't post really often. But they did comment enough to get on the race, so. And they won this time. We'll see you in the video. Have a good week. Happy Halloween. Happy spooky season. Look forward to all of our Halloween events. Alright, Mr. Bud. Are you going to tell him something hilarious or historical?
A little both.
Historically hilarious?
Historical hilarious. Or historically historian in origin. Basically on this, on the date, October the 2nd, 1950, was basically the genesis of the Peanuts cartoon. Came out in 6 newspapers. But to give you a full picture, I was going to tell a little bit of the story about the guy behind it, Charles Schulz. Now, Charles, for the benefit of the world of cartoons and the newspaper industry, helped influence guys like Jim Davis from Garfield, Murray Ball, Bill Watterson, Matt Groening, and Dave Pilkey. He started out at the Minneapolis, Minnesota, Charles Monroe Schulz, November 26, 1922. He grew up in St. Paul, the only child of Carl Fred Schulz and Dina Halverson. He was of German and Norwegian descent. He had an uncle who nicknamed him Sparky, after the horse Sparkplug in Billy DeBeck's comic strip, Barney Google, which Schultz enjoyed reading. Well, Schultz would attend the Richards Gordon Elementary School in St. Paul, where he skipped 2 half grades. He became a shy, timid teenager, perhaps as a result of being the youngest in his class at Central High School. Now, Schultz loved to draw and sometimes drew his family dog Spike, which ate unusual things such as pins and tacks. In 1937, Schultz drew a picture of Spike and sent it to Ripley's Believe It or Not. His drawing would appear in Roger Ripley's syndicated panel captioned, "A hunting dog that eats pins, tacks, and razor blades is owned by C.F. Schultz, St. Paul, Minnesota, and drawn by Sparky." Now, another noteworthy episode in his high school life was the rejection of his drawings by his high school yearbook.
Rejection of school.
Yes, well, which he referred to as Peanuts years later, when he had drawn Lucy to ask Charlie Brown to sign a picture he drew of a horse, only then to say it was a prank. A 5-foot-tall statue of Snoopy was later placed on the school's main office 60 years later.
I would not have allowed them to do that.
No kidding.
That's just rude.
You guys didn't you print it then, you don't get to have it now. Well, Schultz would go on in February of 1943. His mother died after a long illness, and at the time of their death, he had only recently been made aware that she suffered from cancer. Schultz had, by all accounts, been very close to his mother. Her death had a significant effect on him. About the same time, Schultz was drafted into the United States Army.
Oops.
He would serve as a staff sergeant with the 20th Armored Division in Europe during World War II as a squad leader on a 50 caliber machine gun team. He saw combat at the very end of the war. Schultz said he only had one opportunity to fire his machine gun but forgot to load it.
Yes. Whoops.
Yep. And
He's a good soldier.
Yeah. German soldier could have fired it, who he could have fired at, willingly surrendered. Years later, Schultz proudly spoke of his wartime service. For being under fire, he did receive a combat infantry badge, of which he was very proud. Well, late 1945, he would return to Minnesota, where he did lettering for a Roman Catholic comic magazine, Timeless Topics. Before he was drafted, Schultz had taken a correspondence course at school, Art Instruction, Inc. In 1946. Schultz took a job at the school where he reviewed and graded students' work. He developed at the school for several years as he developed a career as a comic creator. Now, the anti-communist propaganda comic book Is This Tomorrow featured some of Schultz's early work. Schultz's first group of regular cartoons, a weekly series of one-panel jokes called Little Folks, was published from 1947 until 1950 January at the St. Paul Pioneer Press, which Schultz usually was doing about 4 one-panel drawings per issue. It was in Little Folks that Schultz first used the name Charlie Brown for a character, although they applied the name in 4 gags to 3 different boys as well as one buried in sand.
Oops.
The series also had a dog that looked a lot like Snoopy. Well, in May 1948, Schultz sold his first one-panel drawing to the Saturday Evening Post, and within the next 2 years, a total of 17 untitled drawings by Schultz were published in the Post, simultaneously with his work for the Pioneer Press. Around the same time, he tried to have Little Folks syndicated through the Newspaper Enterprise Association. Schultz would have been an independent contractor for the syndicate, unheard of in the 1940s, but the deal fell through. Little Folks was dropped from the Pioneer Press in January of 1950. Well, later that year, Schultz was approached. He approached United Feature Syndicate with a one-panel series, Little Folks, and the syndicate became interested. By that time, Schultz had also developed a comic strip, usually using 4 panels rather than 1, and to Schultz's delight, the syndication preferred the longer version. However, to his consternation, the syndicate had to change the title of Schultz's strip for legal reasons. Schultz selected a new name, Peanuts. Well, Peanuts would make its first appearance on October the 2nd, 1950.
Makes you wonder why he chose Peanuts.
Yeah, it is a good question. First appearance was October the 2nd, 1950 in 7 newspapers. The weekly Sunday paper debuted on January 6, 1952. After a slow start, Peanuts eventually became one of the most popular comic strips of all time, as well as the one most influential. Schultz had a short-lived, sports-oriented comic strip. It's only a game in 1957 to 59. However, he abandoned it after the success of Peanuts. From 1956 to 65, he contributed to a gag cartoon, Young Pillars, featuring teenagers to youth, a publication associated with the Church of God. In 1957 to 61, he illustrated 2 volumes of Art Linkletter's Kids Say the Darndest Things, and in 1964, he illustrated a collection of letters, Dear President Johnson, by Bill Adler. Now, at its height, Peanuts was published daily in 2,600 papers in 75 countries in 21 languages.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, over nearly 50 years, Schultz would draw 17,897 published Peanut strips.
That makes my hand hurt.
Yeah, just thinking about it. The strips, plus merchandise and product endorsements, produced revenues of more than $1 billion per year, with Schultz earning an estimated $30 million to $40 million annually.
I can see that.
Yeah. During the strip's run, Schultz only took one vacation, a 5-week break in late 1997 to celebrate his 75th birthday. Reruns of the strip ran during his vacation, the only time occurred during Schultz's life. They can go into a little bit of detail on Peanuts here, because they mentioned the fact that it started in 1950, went through 2000, continuing in reruns afterwards. Peanuts is among the most popular and influential in the history of comic strips, arguably the longest story ever told by one human being. At the time of Schultz's death in 2000, again, you're talking 2,600 newspapers, which is just a huge amount across the entire nation, across the world.
Right.
Readership of roughly 355 million, translated into 21 languages, which was kind of impressive too.
Right.
It helped to cement the 4-panel gag strip as the standard in the United States, and together with its merchandise, again would earn Schultz over $1 million. Following the successful animated TV and stage theatrical adaptations over the U.S., 5 animated theatrical films were released so far. And then one that's more interesting is that they had one come out in 2015. We saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Peanuts focuses on the social circle of young children where the adults exist but are rarely seen or heard. The main character, Charlie Brown, is meek, nervous, and lacks self-confidence. Unable to fly a kite. I feel sorry for him and kites.
But kites do not like him.
I mean, there's times you'll see him hanging from upside down from the tree. The kite's right there on the ground, or the kite-eating tree. I remember that gag too. Tree with a big grin on its face. You try to kick a football held by the irascible friend Lucy, who always pulls it away at the last instant.
Friend with quotation marks.
I hate Lucy.
I had a love-hate relationship with Lucy. The thing I loved is that she did try to give advice. She wasn't very good at it, but she was also very blunt and said, this is what you need to do, and here's how you do it.
Yeah. Peanuts was a literate strip with philosophical, psychological, and sociological overtones, which was innovative in the 1950s. The humor is psychologically complex and driven by the characters' interactions and relationships. The comic strip has been adapted to animation and theater. And Schultz, interestingly enough, drew every strip through nearly 50 years with no assistance, including the lettering and coloring process. Now, Peanuts, this might be your answer we're looking for. It says Peanuts was originally sold under the title of Little Folks, but that had been used before, so they said, we have to think of another title. I couldn't think of one. Somebody at United Features came up with the miserable title Peanuts, which I hate and have always hated. It has no dignity and it was not descriptive. What can I do? Here I was, an unknown kid from St. Paul. I couldn't think of anything else. So I said, why can't we call it Charlie Brown? And the president said, well, we can't copyright a name like that. We didn't ask them about Nancy or Steve Canyon. I was in no position to argue. This was from an interview by Charles Schultz in 1987 with Frank Prowler of the Daily News. Now,
that's kind of annoying because somebody at the paper said, "Hey, let's do this." He didn't like it, but nobody else had anything better.
Yeah, it's like
I don't like that.
Yeah, that's kind of a sharp blow at the very beginning of everything. Now, elementary details of the cartoon shared similarities to Peanuts. The name Charlie Brown was first used there. The series also had a dog that looked very much like the 1950s version of Snoopy. Schultz submitted his Little Folks cartoons to the United Feature Syndicate, who responded with interest. He visited the syndicate in New York City and presented a package of new comic strips he had worked on, rather than the panel cartoons he had submitted. The UFS found that they preferred the comic strip, and when the UFS was preparing to syndicate the comic strip, Tack Knight, who authored the retired 1930 comic strip Little Folks, sought to claim exclusive rights to the title being used. Well, Schultz argued in a letter to Knight that the contraction of little to Lil was intended to avoid this conflict, but conceded that the final decision would be from the syndicate. A different name for the comic strip became necessary after legal advice confirmed that Little Folks was a registered trademark. Meanwhile, the production manager for UFS noted that the popularity of children's program Howdy Doody. The show featured an audience of children who were seated in the Peanut Gallery and were referred to as Peanuts. This inspired the decision title that was forced upon Schultz to his consternation.
Well, that's a little bit better of a story than the first one we got.
Yeah.
That they were inspired by Howdy Doody, and the kids were in the Peanut Gallery and called Peanuts, and it's a comic about kids. That makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah. So, on they were going with the 1997 history. Back in the 1950s, though, going all the way back to the first thing, it says that the strip began as a daily strip on October 2nd, 1950. The 7 newspapers, the Minneapolis Star, hometown paper, that would be kind of cool, page 37 with a short article, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the Denver Post, the Seattle Times, and 2 newspapers in Pennsylvania, the Evening Chronicle out of Allentown, and the Globe Times out of Bethlehem. The first strip was 4 panels long and showed Charlie Brown walking by 2 other young children, Shermie and Patty. Shermie lauds Charlie Brown as he walks by, but then tells Patty how much he hates him in the final panel. Snoopy, interestingly enough, would appear as an early character, first appearing in the 3rd strip, which ran on October 4th, and its first Sunday strip would appear 2 years later on January 6th in a half-page format, which was the only complete format for the entire life of the Sunday strip. Most of the other characters didn't become regulars until later. Violet would come along on February 1951, Schroeder in May of 1951, Lucy in March of 1952, Linus in September 1952, Pigpen would come along in 1954, Sally wouldn't appear until 1959. I remember when she was first born. That was kind of a weird circumstance because it showed them pushing her in a stroller, and Charlie Brown was not thrilled with that idea much either. Frida appeared in 1961. Peppermint Patty appeared in 1966. And
Peppermint Patty was another one of my favorites.
Yeah. Franklin would appear in 1968. Woodstock would appear in 1966, but wouldn't be named until 1970. Marcy appeared in 1971. Always liked Marcy. And Rerun. March 1972.
I remember Rerun, and I was just like, that poor child.
That poor child. It's like Linus all over again. Now,
well, imagine being named Rerun, though.
Yeah, one more time. Now, Schultz decided to produce all aspects of the strip himself, from the script to the finished art and lettering. Schultz did, however, hire help to produce the comic strip adaptations of Peanuts. Thus, the strip was able to be presented with a unified tone, and Schultz was able to employ a minimalistic style. Backgrounds were generally not used, and when they were, Schultz frazzled lines imbued them with a fraught psychological appearance. This style has been described by art critic John Carlin as forcing its readers to focus on subtle nuances rather than the broad actions or sharp transitions. Schultz held this belief all his life, reaffirming in 1994 the importance of crafting the strip itself. This is not a crazy business about slinging ink. This is deadly serious business. Now, while the strip was in its early years resembles its later form, there are significant differences. The art was cleaner, sleeker, and simpler, with thicker lines and short spot characters. For example, in those early strips, Charlie Brown's famous round head is closer to the shape of an American football or rugby football. Most of the kids were initially Charlie Brown's famous round head was closer to the shape of American football or rugby football. Most of the kids were fairly round-headed. I've got some of my old books, and it's really weird looking at what Charlie Brown started out like.
Oh yeah, and I've seen a few drawings, and it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
it's a choice.
Yep. And as another example, all the characters except Charlie Brown had their mouths longer and had smaller eyes when they looked sideways. Well, in would stumble the 60s, and this was generally considered the golden age for Peanuts. During that period, some of the strip's best-known themes and characters would appear, including Peppermint Patty, Snoopy as the World War I flying ace,
Woo!
Frida and her naturally curly hair, and Franklin. Peanuts is remarkable for the deft social commentary, especially compared to other strips appearing in the 50s and 60s. Schultz did not explicitly address racial and gender equality issues so much as assure them to be self-evident. Peppermint Patty's athletic skill and self-confidence are simply taken for granted, for example, as is Franklin's presence in the racially integrated school and neighborhood. Now, Franklin's creation occurred, at least in part, due to a result of Schultz's 1968 correspondence with a socially progressive fan. The fact that Charlie Brown's baseball team had 3 girls on it was also at least 10 years ahead of its time. The 1966 primetime television special Charlie Brown's All-Stars dealt with Charlie Brown refusing sponsorship of his team on the condition he fire the girls and Snoopy because the league does not allow girls or dogs to play. How dare they?
How dare they?
Now, Schultz threw theatrical barbs at any number of topics he chose. His child and animal characters satirized the adult world. Over the years, he tackled everything from the Vietnam War to school dress codes to new math. In May 20th, 1962, strip featured an icon that stated "Defend Freedom, buy U.S. savings bonds." In '63, he added a little boy named 5 to the cast, whose sisters were named 3 and 4 when their father had changed the family name to their zip code, giving in to the way numbers were taking over people's identities. Hey, Pi, come here a sec. It's very crazy, but trust me, it's going to happen one of these days. Also in 1963, one strip showed Sally being secretive about school prayer in reference to the Supreme Court decisions on it that year. In '58, a strip in which Snoopy tossed Linus into the air and boasted that he was the first dog ever to launch a human, parodied the hype associated with Sputnik 2's launch of Lakia, the dog into space earlier that year. I would have loved to see that.
That's a fun one.
Another sequence lampooned the Little Leagues, an organized play when all the neighborhood kids joined snowman building leagues, and criticized Charlie Brown when he insists on building his own snowman without leagues or coaches. I've never heard of that. That would be weird.
I didn't know that there were leagues and coaches for building snowmen.
No kidding.
We've been doing it wrong, babes.
All these years. Yeah.
How do we join a league or get a coach? Because I need one. I need both.
Apparently that's why mine never worked out well. Peanuts also touched on religious themes on many occasions, especially during the 1960s. The classic special with Charlie Brown Christmas from 1965,
which is a great one.
Yes, features the character Linus Van Pelt quoting the King James Version of the Bible, Luke 2, 8 through 14, to explain to Charlie Brown what Christmas is all about. In personal interviews, Schultz mentioned that Linus represented his spiritual side. Because of the explicit religious material in Charlie Brown Christmas, many have interpreted Schultz's work to having a distinct Christian theme, though this popular perspective has been to view the franchise through a secular lens. During the week of July 29, 1968, Schultz debuted the African-American character Franklin to the strip at the urging of white Jewish Los Angeles schoolteacher Harriet Glickman. Though Schultz feared that adding a black character would be seen as patronizing to the African-American community, Glickman convinced him that the addition of black characters could help normalize the idea of friendships between children of different ethnicities. Franklin would appear in a trio of strips set at a beach, in which he first gets Charlie Brown's beach ball from the water and subsequently helps him build a sand castle in which he mentions that his father is in Vietnam. Now, in 1975, the panel format was shortened slightly horizontally, and shortly thereafter the lettering became larger to compensate. Previously, the daily Peanut strips were formatted in a 4-panel space-saving format, with the very rare 8-panel strips that would still fit into the 4-panel mold. Beginning on Leap Day in 1988, Schultz abandoned the 4-panel format in favor of 3-panel dailies and occasionally used the entire length of the strip as one panel, partly for experimentation but also to combat the dwindling size of the comics page. In the late 1970s, during Schultz's negotiations with the United Feature Syndicate over a new contract, Syndicate President William C. Payette hired superhero comic artist Al Plastino to draw a backlog of Peanut strips to hold in reserve in case Schultz left the strip. When Schultz and the Syndicate reached a successful agreement, United Media stored these unpublished strips, the existence of which eventually became public. I feel kind of insulted.
Right?
You want to draw my stuff, and I'd be hiring a lawyer right about that. United Media would store these, and the existence eventually became public. Plastino himself also claimed to have ghostwritten for Schultz while Schultz underwent heart surgery in 1983. Well, 1980s and 90s, the strip remained the most popular in comic history, although other comics such as Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes rivaled Peanuts in popularity. Schultz continued to write the strip until announcing his retirement on December 14, 1999, due to failing health. Now, the last 3 Peanuts strips that were run from Saturday, January 1st through Monday, January 3rd in 2000. The Saturday strip showed a snowball fight between Peppermint Patty and Marcy and Charlie Brown, with Linus, while Snoopy sitting behind the fight trying to figure out how to throw a snowball. The strip was notable because, in addition to it being the last daily strip of the story, Schultz's health had deteriorated to the point where the lettering of the strip had to be done by computer. The Sunday strip featured the last appearances of Peppermint Patty and Marcy, with Peppermint Patty playing a game of football in the rain by herself. Marcy comes up carrying an umbrella, remarking that everyone has gone home. Peppermint Patty laments that they never shook hands, and she said, "Good game." The January 3rd strip consisted of a drawing of Snoopy sitting atop of his doghouse with his typewriter, as he'd done many times over the course of the strip's lifespan. The drawing was accompanied by a printed note by Schultz, which officially announced his retirement from the drawing and thanked his readers for their support. Now, although a series of reruns of older strips would begin on January 4th, 2000, there were still 6 Sunday strips that Schultz had completed. The first of these ran on January 9th, featuring Rerun and Snoopy playing in the snow. The second featured the last appearance of Woodstock, as he and Snoopy had one last fantasy sequence, being called upon by George Washington to chop firewood. Rerun makes his final appearance in the fourth, trying to paint something other than flowers in art class. And Sally makes her last appearance in the fifth, conversing with Charlie Brown about love letters. The final Peanuts strip, as shown here, ran on February 13th, 2000, the night after Schultz died from a heart attack. It consisted of 2 small panels across the top and a large panel at the bottom. The title panel shows Charlie Brown talking to someone on the telephone who is apparently asking to speak to Snoopy. Charlie Brown responds by telling the caller, "No, I think he's writing." The second panel shows Snoopy sitting on top of his doghouse, typing on his typewriter, as he had many times before, while the words "Dear Friends" appears above his head. The larger panel at the bottom consisted of a larger scale drawing of the final daily strip with Snoopy against a blue sky background. Above his head, several panels from past strips were overlaid. Underneath these panels, the full note that Schultz had written to his fans was printed. Part of that was omitted on the final daily strip. It read as follows: "Dear friends, I have been fortunate to draw Charlie Brown and his friends for almost 50 years. It has been the fulfillment of my childhood ambition. Unfortunately, I'm no longer able to maintain the schedule demanded by a daily comic strip. My family does not wish Peanuts to be continued by anyone else, therefore I am announcing my retirement. I have been grateful over these years for the loyalty of our editors and the wonderful support and love expressed to me by fans of the comic strip. Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Linus, Lucy, how can I ever forget them? Charles N. Schultz." Now, interesting thing, after he passed on, the tributes just flowed out of everywhere. People were drawing little, mementos in their comic strips to Charles, regarding what sort of path that he created for everybody. There was one I remember that was really cool. Is that there was an angel holding a football, looking at. Pause, please.
Hang on a second. All right, on we go.
Okay. But yeah, there was a lot of neat little dedications that different comic writers had taken put out. I remember seeing some from Calvin and Hobbes had a few issues. If I remember, I think even Berkeley Breathed with Outland put together a few oddball things. And there was one with an angel that actually got Charlie Brown his chance to kick a football, which was really cool. But as for the folks at United Feature Syndicate, after Peanuts ended, they began offering newspapers a new package of reprinted strips under the title Classic Peanuts. The syndicate limited the choices from strips either from the 60s or from the 90s, although the newspaper was also given the option to carry both reprint packages if they desired. All Sunday strips in the package, however, came from the 60s. Peanuts would continue to be prevalent in multiple media through widespread syndication, the publication of the complete Peanuts, the release of several new television specials, all of which Schultz had worked on but not finished before his death, and Peanuts Motion Comics. Additionally, Boom Studios had published several series of comic books that feature new material by new writers and artists, although some of it was based on classic Schultz stories from decades past, as well as some classic strips by Schultz, mostly Sunday color strips. One graphic novel, Scotland Bound Charlie Brown, adapts a canceled Schultz and Melendez script. In early 2011, United Media, the parent of United Feature Syndicate, struck a distribution deal with Universal U-Click, now known as the Andrews McMeel Syndication, for syndication of the company's 150 comic strip and news features, including Peanuts. January 5th, 2015, Go Comics announced that it would begin launching Peanuts Begins, a feature rerunning the entire history of the strip, beginning in colorized form. This is done in honor of the 65th anniversary of the strip's debut. They go through a quick list. They got your usual Charlie Brown. He's a young boy. He is the main character, acting as the center of the strip's world and serving as the everyman. He's also seen as decent, considerate, and reflective. He's awkwardly, deeply sensitive, and said to suffer from an inferiority complex. Charlie Brown is a constant failure. He can never win a ball game. He can never successfully fly a kite. His sense of determination, regardless of the certainty of failure, can be interpreted as either self-defeating stubbornness or admirable persistence. When he fails, however, he experiences pain and anguish through self-pity. The journalist Christopher Caldwell observed the tension between Charlie Brown's negative and positive attitudes, stating, "What makes Charlie Brown such a rich character is that he's not purely a loser. The self-loathing that causes him so much anguish is decidedly not self-effacement. Charlie Brown is optimistic enough to think that he can earn a sense of self-worth." Schultz named Charlie Brown after a colleague of his while working in art instruction, whose full name was Charles Francis Brown. Readers and critics have explored the question as to whether Schultz based Charlie Brown on himself. This question often carried the suggestion that the emotionally sensitive and depressed behavior of Charlie Brown drew from Schultz's own life or childhood experiences.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Commenting on these conclusions being drawn, Schultz said in a 1968 interview, "I think of myself as Charles Schultz, but if someone wants to believe I'm really Charlie Brown, well, it makes a good story." He explained in another interview that the comic strip as a whole is a personal expression, and so is impossible to avoid all the characters presenting aspects of his personality. Biographer David Michaelis made the similar conclusion, describing Charlie Brown as simply representing Schultz's wishy-washiness and determination. Regardless, some profiles in Schultz confidently held that Charlie Brown was based on him. And my favorite, Snoopy. Snoopy is a dog who later in the development of the strip would be described as a beagle. While generally behaving like a real dog and having non-speaking roles, he connects readers through having human thoughts. Despite acting like a real dog some of the time, Snoopy possesses many different anthropomorphic traits. He frequently walks on his hind legs and is able to use tools, including a typewriter. He introduces fantasy elements to the strip by extending his identity through various alter egos. Many of the alter egos, such as a world-famous attorney, surgeon, or secret agent, has been seen only once or twice, though others, such as the World War I flying ace with sunglasses wearing Joe Cool, are featured many times over a period of years. His character is also a mixture of innocence and egoism. He possesses childlike joy while on occasion being somewhat selfish. He has an arrogant commitment to independence, but is often shown to be dependent on humans. Schultz was careful in balancing Snoopy's life between the real dog and that of a fantastical character. While the exterior of Snoopy's doghouse is of small dimensions, the interior is described in the strip as having such a thing as a recreation room, a library, a pool table, and being adorned with paintings of Andrew Wyeth and Van Gogh. It is never shown. It would be demanded of an appropriate kind of suspension of disbelief from the readers. I remember one time it was so funny because he hired Midas to paint the ceiling in the doghouse for the Sistine Chapel. And I'm like, oh, God, you're having way too much fun with your imagination. Now, Linus and Lucy are siblings. Linus is the younger brother, and Lucy is the older sister. Lucy is bossy, selfish, and opinionated, and she often delivers commentary as an honest, albeit offensive and sarcastic way. Schultz described Lucy as full of misdirected confidence, but having the virtue to be capable of cutting right down to the truth. He said that Lucy is mean because she is funny, particularly because she is a girl. He posted that a boy being mean to girls would not be funny at all, describing a pattern in the comic strip writing, where it is comical when supposedly weak characters dominate supposedly strong characters. Lucy at times acts as a psychiatrist and charges 5 cents for a psychiatric advice to other characters, usually Charlie Brown, from her psychiatric booth, a booth parodying the setup of a lemonade stand. Lucy's role as a psychiatrist has attracted attention from real-life individuals in the field of psychology. The psychiatrist Athar Yawar playfully identified various moments in the strip of her activities could be characterized as pursuing medical and scientific interests, commenting Lucy is very much the modern doctor. Linus is Charlie Brown's most loyal and uplifting friend and introduces intellectual, spiritual, and reflective elements to the strip. He offers opinions on topics such as literature, art, science, politics, and theology. He possesses a sense of morality and ethical judgment that enables him to navigate topics such as faith, intolerance, and depression. Linus acts as a philosopher and open ear to Charlie Brown's dilemmas and worries. Schultz enjoys the adaptability of the character, remarking he can be very smart as well as dumb. He has a tendency of expressing lofty or pompous ideas that are quickly rebuked. He finds psychological security in thumb-sucking and holding the blanket for comfort. How many of us want that blanket?
I want a blanket.
It's a great blanket. The idea of a security blanket originated from Schultz's own observation of his first 3 children who carried around blankets. Schultz described Linus's blanket as probably the single best thing I've ever thought of.
Right.
He was proud of its versatility and the visual humor of it, and how the phrase security blanket entered the dictionary. The next pair up, we have Peppermint Patty and Marcy, who are 2 girls who are friends. They attended different schools than Charlie Brown on the other side of town, and so represent a slightly different social circle.
In this day and age, they would be a couple. I'm sorry, those 2 always gave off, we're together.
Yep.
I know that they're children and it's, not romantic, but
Yep.
I just always put them, they were a pair.
Yeah. And Peppermint Patty was always introduced kind of as a tomboy who has the forthright and loyal to, and has what Schultz described as a devastating singleness of purpose. She frequently misunderstands things to the extent that her confusion serves as the premise of many individual strips and stories. In one story, she prepares for a skating competition only to learn with disastrous results that it's for roller skating and not ice skating.
Oops.
She struggles at school and with her homework and often falls asleep in school. The wife of Charles Schultz, Jean Schultz, suggested that this is the consequences for how Peppermint Patty's single father works late. She stays awake at night waiting for him. In general, Charles Schultz imagined that some of her problems were from having an absent mother. Marcy is bookish and a good student. Schultz described her as relatively perceptive compared to other characters, stating that she sees the truth in things, although she perpetually addresses Peppermint Patty as Sir.
Yes.
The writer Laura Bradley identifies her role as unassuming one with sage-like insights. Other characters that would come and go, we have Sally Brown, who is the younger sister of Charlie Brown, also has a crush on Linus. Schroeder, a boy who is fanatic about Beethoven. I always loved Schroeder.
Schroeder was such a weird character.
The way he could play that piano, though, I mean, that tiny little piano, great big orchestra sound, awesome for concerts. And of course, Lucy would start trying to get affections on the boy.
Yes, Lucy fell hard for him.
Yeah. Pigpen, our walking cloud, as we like to call him, the original smokescreen. Franklin, again, mentioned the African-American boy, when actually it was a suggestion after following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Since it was Schultz's intention to achieve this without being patronizing, he is a relatively normal character who mainly reacts to the oddness of other characters. Woodstock, the bird, and Snoopy's friend. I feel Woodstock has always been a favorite
Woodstock is everybody's favorite, let's face it. Woodstock is awesome sauces.
I always loved the one time when he made a house on top of Snoopy's nose, and then started setting up a ski lift, and I'm like, oh my, this is not going to go well.
You never know what he's saying because he only talks some lines.
Lines, yeah.
He's an important character.
Yeah. Spike, Snoopy brother who lives alone in the California desert. There are several others. Olaf was another of Snoopy's characters. Brothers. Sherby, boy with a crew cut, was introduced as one of Charlie Brown's friends at the first strip and began disappearing around the end and last appeared in 1969. Schultz became to dislike Sherby, describing as an extra little boy and only used when he required a character with a little personality. Patty was another original character from 1950. Before her disappearances dwindled to just one as being a sidekick or background character, was last appeared in 1995. Violet Gray appeared in 1951, became memorable for her near continual abuse of Charlie Brown, especially not inviting him to parties or bragging about her affluent father, last appearance in 1996. Charlotte Braun was introduced in 1954 as a female counterpart, but her unpopularity led to Schultz killing her off in a tongue-in-cheek letter to a fan in 1955. Frida, her last appearance was in 1985 after a 7-year absence. Basically kind of became infrequent by 1970. First appeared in 1961. Made attempts for Snoopy to chase rabbits. Rerun, Lucy and Linus's young brother first appeared in 1973 and were continually appearing until the final strip in 2000. Initially a background character, Rerun became a foreground character by the 1990s. Eudora, a friend of Sally's from summer camp, arrived in 1978, had one of the shortest tenures of the strip, last appearing in 1987. And then Lydia, a classmate of Linus's who seemed to have a lukewarm romantic interest in him, was introduced in 1986 and appeared as a regular recurring character until 1999. But that is a little peek at the history of the Peanuts characters from their first kickoff in October 2nd, 1950, and then almost 50 years worth of therapy from the Peanuts gang.
You haven't read the Peanuts, haven't heard the Peanuts, read the Peanuts.
Yeah, you definitely need some therapy, and it's fun stuff. So you gotta love the simplicity of it, but also there's a lot of neat messages in there. So, but this has been the Bearded Historian for the Mud Files, and we will see you guys next week unless Sue fires me again.
You're already fired.
Yay! Oh, right.
Also, welcome to October. We have 13 days till they're new. A lot of shit that we still need to figure out, like the song.
Right.
We need song suggestions, peoples.
Yeah, come up with some suggestions. throw them in the comments, and we'll try to dig them up and listen to them sometime.
Sometime between now and the end of the year.
Yeah.